Two examples Jesus has of more miracles that he performed. But then Jesus is going to explain that following him, to be a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ, there are some costs associated with that. We know and will explain the salvation that he provides, the salvation that he's already provided, the benefits, the great pros that we get in following Jesus. But he's going to say, look, there are going to be some costs associated with following me. He doesn't say those things to scare people away. He doesn't say that to say it's not worth it. But he's saying, I want to be truthful. I want to be honest with you and not just sugarcoat things. And then all of a sudden, when things are coming at you that look like something you're struggling with, you're hurting with, I don't want you to go, you never said this was part of the deal. So we'll look at Matthew 8, starting in verse 1 and 2. We'll see Jesus displays his incredible might over sickness. In verse 1, when he had come down from the mountain, great multitudes followed him. And behold, a leper came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, make me clean. So we see it says, when he came down from the mountain, a great multitude followed him. You have to remember, at this point, Jesus has already been performing tons and tons of miracles that have been gaining attention. I shared during the first story a few years ago, and Chris and I always joke about this because you see this in the news and different things. But we were out somewhere, and there was a big group of people following around. This was in Colorado Springs. They were following this, and at this time, I don't know if it still is, Colorado Springs had a lot of like the Winter Olympic training grounds were in Colorado Springs. So you had the men's and women's hockey team and all the different professional athletes. And these people were following, this large crowd following this one guy. And we were like, oh, cool, I wonder who it is. So of course we joined in the crowd. We're looking, and I see the guy in the center, and I'm like, I have absolutely no idea who this guy is. I couldn't tell you anything about this. So I asked the guy next to me. I said, who is this guy? And the guy goes, I have absolutely no idea. I just saw a bunch of people following him, and I thought I should too. Here they are. People are asking for autographs. They're like trying to shake his hand, all these things. And I was like, well, do I need an autograph of this guy? And maybe it's worth something. I don't know. We look at Jesus. People have heard what he's done. They're excited. Great multitudes are following him around. And it says, behold, a leper came and worshipped him. In the ancient world, as is today, leprosy was a terrible, destructive disease. And the ancient leper had no hope of improvement. So the leper came to Jesus with a great need of desperation. Again, I'm not going to go into all the details of leprosy and how terrible it can be, the loss of limbs or different things. But at that time, according to Jewish law and custom, one had to keep 6 feet away from someone who had leprosy. So if Fred had leprosy, I had to stay at least this far away from Fred. Now, if the wind's coming in the direction, it's fine right now. But if the wind was coming in the direction where Fred's scent, so to say, or him, was being blown towards me, I would have to stay, or he would have to stay from me 150 feet away. You couldn't touch them. They were basically, what would happen is they would make little encampments outside of town, well outside the walls, and that's where all the lepers would go and live. Nobody could go touch them. They couldn't come into town to trade, to buy, to do anything. They were isolated and separated because of that. The only thing in Jewish law that was more defiling than coming in contact with a leper was a dead body. So nobody wanted to touch them. But nevertheless, the leper came to Jesus by himself, despite the many discouragements. Now think about this man, this leper. He knew how terrible his problem was. Nobody had to explain to him how terrible the disease of leprosy was. He understood it. He was going through it. He had all the negative ailments that came with it. He knew that other people gave up on him as having a hopeless condition. It doesn't say, I'm not trying to read into the story, but imagine all of his family basically said, okay, you have to go outside town. We can't see you again. We don't really want to talk to you. We don't want to come near you ourselves. So now he's isolated from family and friends. He had no one who could take him or would take him to Jesus. He had no previous example of Jesus healing a leper to give him hope. Now, Jesus had performed other miracles, but at this point, nothing in Scripture tells us that a leper had been healed yet. He had no invitation from Jesus and the disciples, and he must have felt ashamed and alone. So here he is, by himself, thinking there's no way. But we read, he says, Lord, if you are willing. The leper had no doubt whatsoever about the ability of Jesus to heal. His only question was if Jesus was willing to do so. We read letter A, Jesus touches the leper and cleanses him. Verse 3, then he put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Now, as I talked about a few weeks ago when we had the paralytic man who was healed at the pool of Bethsaida, here Jesus does another thing that's completely contrary to what the religious Jews were doing. Again, as I mentioned, you had to stay a certain amount of feet away from that. And what does Jesus do to heal him? He reaches his hand out and touches him. Now, did Jesus have to touch the man in order to heal him? No, I don't think so. What I think Jesus is trying to echo again through his actions is absolutely no sickness, no ailment, health-wise, nothing has any power over me. Leprosy isn't something I'm scared of because I can control it, as I can control life and death. Jesus says, I am willing. Jesus' assurance that I am willing simply answered the man's question and gives us a starting point for the times we wonder if Jesus is willing to heal. And we should assume Jesus is willing to heal unless he shows us differently. Now, even this morning, we had great news of provision we saw through tests and how the Lord worked in those situations. But I want to be very careful, because it can be a temptation oftentimes for us to say, well, we read right here, Jesus healed a leper. He healed a man with leprosy. Why in the world did he not heal the ailment that I'm going through? Why did he not heal my family's ailment? Every single ailment does not just mean if I ask the Lord to heal it, he has to. He's bound by law. He has to do it. No. Jesus does things for purposes we don't always understand and reasons we don't always understand. But here he's saying that Jesus was willing and the power was not stopping him. The issue of the leprosy was not. Then it says immediately the leprosy was cleansed. The former leper's life was changed forever. He was not only healed, but as he requested, he was cleansed. Now I shared this in the first service, and again, this is just conjecture, but imagine now this man's been healed of leprosy. We don't know how many years he had it or months or how long, but now he's completely healed, and according to Jewish law, he's now welcomed back into town. I think of it like I think of kids. Right now, we're doing some house projects, so we're staying in a camper right outside our house. We've got one bathroom where the water's still on, where we're taking showers, using the bathroom, everything like that. Both our boys, well, two of our boys, one's 1-year-old, but our 5-year-old and our 3-year-old are at the stage we let them use the bathroom by themselves, and we trust them to then take care of the necessary things afterwards. And lately, big thing, and I'm sure if you've had children know this, hand washing is kind of the thing they're struggling with. They know how to use the bathroom, but then the hand washing afterwards. And our 5-year-old has even gotten to the point, what he'll do is he'll turn the faucet on, he'll just run his hands under the water really quick to get them wet. Because when he runs out, at first I would say, did you wash your hands? And he'd say, my hands were wet. At first I thought that meant, yeah, I washed my hands are wet, we're good. No. What he means is, I've dunked them under the water, they're wet, so that way I didn't have to lather and take time to actually use soap. To which I ask him, you're taking more time and effort to get your hands wet than you would actually be to just clean them in the first place. But think about this man with leprosy. He goes back into town. Everyone knows him as the man with leprosy. I wonder if he was welcomed back with open arms. If you knew that man had leprosy, and even though he says he's clean, even though he says he's perfectly healed, is there always a little bit of doubt? Is there always a little bit of them questioning? Again, it's not scriptural, it's just something I thought about. But next we see something interesting in letter B. Jesus commands the man to go and tell the priest. Verse 4, and Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one, but go your way. Show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. So again, he says, see that you tell no one. The reason I think is Jesus was not seeking for this man to go and share this miracle just so others would come and seek to be healed. Jesus was not that interested with healing the physical ailments of men. He was doing that to show himself as the Messiah. But if he just goes in and says, look, the guy outside town is healing everybody. If you want to take all your family, he's ready and can help you. But as we look at this, and so oftentimes, I know I have the thought, maybe you do as well, if I saw Jesus, the Messiah, healing, there's absolutely no way I would look at him as just this healer. But if I told you today, hey, at 2:30 at Beulah Beach, there's going to be a guy who comes in a van. First of all, you're probably going to go, I don't want anything to do with a guy in a van. But if I said there's a guy showing up in a van, and all he has to do is look your way. Doesn't even have to touch you if he doesn't want to. He can heal anything. Any health issue you're having, any health issue that your parents have, your siblings, he can do it. There's no attachments whatsoever. You know what you're going to do? You're going to go run to your car, you're going to pick up every single person you know, and you're going to take them right down there. Why? Because you want the healing from it. You know what you're going to do as soon as you get healed? You're going to hop right back in your car, you're going to go home, and you're going to have a great night talking about how incredible it is that none of you are struggling with any health issues anymore. But you're not going to care what that man has to say. You got what you needed. You were healed. You're done with that part, and now I want to leave. Jesus is saying, no, don't tell people. I'm not interested in just healing all their worldly problems. I came for a much greater purpose. He says, show yourself to the priest. Jesus commanded the man to give a testimony to the priest. And what a testimony it was. He wants to show the priest and say, look, the priest and the religious Jews, you're holding to all these religious laws. You're holding to what I can and cannot do. And I'm saying, I have power over all of it. You're looking for the Messiah. Here I am. Acknowledge me. Now we'll turn to kind of the next part of the story. In verse 5, now we switch. As it says, Jesus leaves. So in verse 5, we see Jesus shows the importance of faith in his power. Verse 5. Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him, saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. It says a centurion came to him. The centurion is a Gentile. He's a Roman officer in the army. Most every Jew under Roman occupation felt some reason to hate the centurion. Again, the Roman guards and officials, essentially, their job was controlling and keeping order over the Jewish people. But yet he came to a Jewish teacher for help. And significantly, he came not for a selfish reason, but on behalf of his servant. It says he pleaded with him. And this shows that the centurion did not make a casual request. Matthew described him as pleading with Jesus on the behalf of his servant. Now, the other day when we were up at Lowe's, we're in the middle of buying things and different things for our house. Turns out we didn't need them. I know a flooring guy in the church. I won't say his name so you don't all ask him for flooring help. But I got these thresholds for the door. Mainly I got the thresholds because the guy at Lowe's looked right at me and said, "How good are you at flooring?" To which I said, "Not very." He goes, "Get these, they'll help you a little bit." We ended up not using them, but when we went to get these thresholds, they had 700 boxes of the flooring we needed. But they had 4 thresholds. Okay? We got all our boxes, and about the same time I'm reaching for the thresholds that I need, another guy starts reaching for the thresholds. Now, an important distinction to note, my hand was on the thresholds first, which means they're mine. Okay? I want to make that very clear. So we reach for them, and the guy looks right at me, and he goes, "Well, how many do you need?" There's 4 of them. I said, "I'm going to get 3 of those." And he goes, "Oh, I needed 3 of those as well." So, okay, well, let's figure this out. Let's not, freak out yet. The Lowe's employee comes up, and I said, "Do you have any more in the back? Do you have any way to look?" So he scans the little number, and he says, "No, these are all we have." And the guy's like, "Well, when's the next shipment coming in?" He goes, "It's going to be like at least a week probably. We just got them in yesterday." I saw this grown man start panicking because he now realized this was at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. He has to go home, tell his wife they're not going to finish their flooring project because he can't get the thresholds necessary to finish the flooring project. So he looked at me and he starts pleading with me. "Please, can we'll just take 2 and 2. Maybe we can eat. Let's figure something out." And I could just see the panic setting in. But I realized my wife, 4 aisles over, was going to have a similar conversation if I came to her with no thresholds. So I looked at him and I said, "I'm sorry, it's every man for themselves. I need these thresholds. I don't know what to tell you." And here this grown man is at 8 o'clock at night in Lowe's. He's pleading with me. He's pleading with the Lowe's employee. "Please, we got to figure something out. Let's do this together." He's not casually asking. At this point, I think he's on his hands and knees about to beg me, "We got to figure something out. I'll pay you extra for these something." When we look at this, it says he's pleading. Not only is he pleading for Jesus to come and heal someone, he's not even asking for himself. He's asking for his servant. He's saying, "Look, I know you can. I know you have the ability. Will you please come and do something?" Spurgeon, when looking over this passage, Spurgeon has a quote. He says, "He seeks a cure, but does not prescribe to the Lord how or where he shall work it. In fact, he does not put his request into word, but pleads the case and lets the sorrow speak." I find it so interesting, and I'm guilty of it as well. When faced with a problem, when faced with something in my life, we ask the Lord, "Lord, please, if it's your will, have deliverance over it." But I would really love if you could have that deliverance right now, when I want it, how I want it, because it's much more convenient. I've already thought the plan out. Let's go ahead and do it. But we have to remember the Lord is not required to work as we expect him to. So oftentimes we say, "Well, Lord, I know you can, so this is how you should do it." And we give him the answer. Letter A we see is the centurion understands Jesus is who he says he is. Verse 7. "And Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. Jesus answers right away and says, I will come and heal him. Jesus did not hesitate to go to the centurion's house. But it's interesting, the centurion looks right at him. This is a Gentile, a high-ranking Gentile in the Roman army. And he says, no, please don't. I'm not worthy to have you step foot in my house. At that time, Jews and Gentiles wouldn't really commingle. They wouldn't have anything really to do with each other if they could help it. So the idea of a Jew going into a Gentile's house is almost unheard of. And here he says, I'm not worthy. He says, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof. Again, most Jews believe that a Gentile home was not worthy of them. And the centurion supposed not only would a Jew not want to come in there, but a great rabbi and teacher like Jesus. Absolutely not. So instead he says, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. The centurion fully understood that Jesus' healing power was not some sort of magic trick that required the magician's presence. He understood, well, Jesus doesn't have to come and touch him. Jesus doesn't have to do anything. Instead, he knew Jesus had true authority and could command things to be done and completed outside of his immediate presence. And then it's interesting, at the end of that, He says, "For I also am a man under authority, having soldiers under me." The centurion recognizes, he's aware of military order, saying, look, I have authority over people, and when I tell them to do something, they do it. At that time, if you didn't do something that your ranking officer told you to, basically, you could be thrown in prison or even put to death for not listening. So he's saying, look, Jesus, I know you have the authority to do it. I listen to you. I respect you. And it's incredible. We see in verse 10, we see Jesus sees his faith and heals. Verse 10, when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, "Assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And I say to you that many will come from east and west and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you." And his servant was healed that same hour. We read, it says, when Jesus heard it, he marveled. Think about it. This is a man who was a Roman officer. More than likely, he had not read through much or any of the Old Testament. So his knowledge of Jesus is limited to the things that he's hearing about the miracles being performed and what's going on around him. And yet he has such great faith so that Jesus marveled at the fact that he's taking Jesus at his word. He's not asking for the evidences right there. He's saying, Lord, you can do it. I know you can. I trust in what you're saying. Jesus says, "Assuredly I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel." Not even those that have the Old Testament, not even those that have the words that point directly to me. You look through the Old Testament, and it's littered throughout with pointing towards the Messiah. It's pointing towards Jesus coming. He's saying, those that have even heard of me don't have faith like you. So what does he do? He heals him. And then he says, many will come from the east and west and sit down with Abraham. Again, this is Jesus here saying, look, I'm going to say something completely contrary, completely different to what the religious Jews have said. Gentile and Jew alike will be welcomed into the kingdom of heaven. Now, I don't know all of you. Some of you are visiting. I might never see some of you again. But that's really good news for me. Why? I'm not Jewish. If Jesus didn't include Gentiles being allowed into heaven, that leaves me no hope. Again, I'm assuming we don't have a ton of people that have Jewish lineage here. Maybe we do. But if you're not, then he's saying you're welcomed as well. The kingdom of heaven is for all people. And we see throughout all the Gospels, he extends it freely to every single person. But then he goes to something that's probably even more radical at that time to say. Not only does he say that heaven is for the Gentiles, he says, but the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. He's saying just because the Gentiles are not excluded, are not kept out of heaven due to their racial identity, the Jews are not automatically welcomed into heaven just by being a Jew. Not only are they not welcomed into the kingdom of heaven, but he says unless they believe in me, they will have eternity in the outer darkness, that is hell, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now it's interesting. I think so oftentimes it's become very easy. In fact, just this week I was listening to a podcast while I was painting. This is from a Christian teacher, a pastor of a church who I'd respected for a long time. I'd heard a lot of what he said and agreed with a lot of it. And as he's talking, he's probably in his 50s now. He said, when I first started in the ministry and when I got out of Bible college and seminary, I believed in the idea of hell. But he said, now I just don't think a loving God would allow for such a place. I don't think God would ever cast anybody into that for unbelief. Well, I hope I'm not the first person to say it to you, but if I am, hell is a very real place. Just as heaven is a very real place, hell is as well. We get to heaven by belief in Jesus Christ and his finished work on the cross. How do we get to hell then? By unbelief. Our sin has put us in a place that separates us from God, and without believing in Jesus Christ's finished work, hell is a place. I don't say that to scare you. I don't say that to be mean and to be, divisive or to say, well, look, that's the group not going to heaven. I say that because I don't want anyone to go there. The only thing that's required is belief in the finished work of Jesus Christ, and he explains it very clearly. He's saying, look, there are people basing their racial identity. The Jews are saying, because I'm Jewish, I can't go there. But as they die and come to realization, without Jesus Christ, that's exactly where they'll end up. Now we're going to skip a few verses. We'll go down to 18, number 3. But this is where I want to really spend a little bit of our focus. We see now that Jesus now teaches of discipleship and the cost of following him. Again, I've explained that belief in Jesus Christ gets us salvation. It gets us much more. We get a relationship with the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. We get blessings, through his name, but there is also a cost of following him. Verse 18 of chapter 8, And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. Then a certain scribe came and said to him, Teachers, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And I said it earlier, but I identify a lot with this guy. My wife will agree. I'm the type of person who puts his foot in his mouth a lot. I agree to a lot of things before I really understand the fullness of it. I mentioned the guy I had come help with flooring yesterday. He probably didn't understand, and maybe he caught on very quickly. I knew nothing of flooring, and so my thought was, hey, if I get him to stay here longer, it's less flooring I have to do under my own power and not under his watch. So the more I get done, the less I have to worry about messing up later. But here, this scribe looks at it, and all he's seen are these miracles of Jesus. At this point in Jesus' life, he's been pretty well receptive most everywhere he's gone. He's got great crowds following him. People are loving what he's doing. And he says, Teacher, I want to go wherever you're going. I want to follow you. I want to be a part of exactly what you're doing. And Jesus says, that's great, but I want to give you the full story. He says, listen, animals have places that they go for refuge, for hiding. I don't have that. He's trying to give them the full truth and saying there's going to be a time where I'm not going to be as well liked. I'm not going to be as well received. And he doesn't say that to scare him off. He doesn't say that so that people don't follow him. He says, I want you to know the full truth. The many blessings we get in Jesus Christ are phenomenal, but that doesn't say there's no cost either. When Jesus saw the great multitude, it says about him, he gave the command to depart to the other side. Again, he doesn't want people just there for the healing. So he says, we need to go. This scribe again says, Teacher, wherever you go, with the miracles associated with the ministry of Jesus, following him might have seemed more glamorous than it really was. And Jesus perhaps received many spontaneous offers like this. And he says, foxes have the holes, the birds have nests. Jesus didn't tell the man, no, you can't follow me, but he told him the truth without painting a glamorized version of what it was like to follow him. When I was in trooper school down in South Carolina, we had a 10-week program for just trooper school, and then I had to go to the police academy. So for the first 8 weeks, we got through the really fun stuff. We got to drive cars fast. We got to shoot guns. We got to do stuff that just sounds really fun. Then we show up on Sunday on the 9th week. Okay, we show up about 5 o'clock, and they said, okay, everyone come into this classroom really quick. So we came, sat in the classroom, and they said, all right, for the next 4 hours, we're going to show you videos. We're going to explain in great detail. We're going to tell you all the terrible side effects and everything that can happen when you were pepper sprayed. Okay? If you know what pepper spray is, if you've ever seen someone be pepper sprayed, if you've ever had the unpleasant, necessary option of having to be pepper sprayed, it's awful. So they go through the whole thing, and they're explaining how terrible it is. They're showing us videos, and the people are just laughing. They think it's the funniest thing in the world to watch these guys, like grown men crying because it hurts so bad. They're explaining how terrible it is. Essentially, if you didn't know, pepper spray is just crushed up really hot peppers, mixed with some oil and some other things in there, okay? And they're like, yeah, it's going to be terrible, okay? So they get all done with that. Then they didn't give us a choice. They said, okay, you've already signed the waiver. You're already here. Our keys, when we go in for the week, they would take our keys and put them in a lockbox, okay, for all our car keys. That way no one could just leave in the middle of the night. They said, your keys are locked away. You can't go anywhere. All right, let's go out and get pepper sprayed now. And I thought, what a terrible way to do that to someone. I like to just sometimes, if I'm going to get painful experiences, just let me have it and not expect it. But the worst thing is someone's telling you, hey guys, 4 hours till it happens. Hey guys, 3 hours and it's coming. Hey guys, here's another video of a grown man crying and he's much tougher than you. All right, let's go do it now. But Jesus isn't trying to scare them off, but he's saying, I want you to have the full truth. I want you to understand there are costs in following me. You know, if you've looked through church history, if you've read through scripture, you understand the apostles of Jesus, not many of them had a great ending of their lives in human thinking and how they died, how they were persecuted. There was a cost associated with that. Jesus says, I'm not trying to hide it from you. I want you to be aware of it. Something interesting I want to note at the end of this, we see it says Son of Man in this passage. The phrase Son of Man is used 81 times in the Gospels, and every time it is either something Jesus said of himself or it's someone directly quoting Jesus' words. And I think it's an important phrase he used to describe himself, and I think it both covers the glory of who he is, but it also brings the humility of who he is as well. He's saying, I'm the Son of Man. We know he's fully God. He's saying, I'm also fully man as well. Letter A, Jesus speaks now of the importance of following him. Verse 21 of chapter 8. Then another one of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. This man says, Lord, let me go and first bury my father. He's not asking to actually go and bury his father. his father was nearing the end of his life. He's saying, let me go and care for my father as he's getting in the last days of his life, last months, even years. And let me just take care of him. But as soon as that's done, I promise I'll come back. I mentioned we've been doing a lot of house projects, and it's hard because we're trying to get our boys to get a sense of, in our minds, a sense of ownership. Boys, it's your house too, help. But I've noticed that it's very easy a temptation to give them kind of the grunt work, right? Yesterday, the job for Lincoln was he had to take all the empty boxes the flooring comes in and run them back and forth to the dumpster. The other day, I was nice to him. I told him every piece of flooring he took out, it was the old flooring. I said, every piece of flooring you put in that dumpster, I'll give you a penny. 3 hours later, he's sweating, he's red in the face, he goes, 143. It's the easiest $1.43 I've ever spent my entire life. But as we look at this, now, as I talk to the boys and I try to get them to do these tasks, I've noticed very quickly, as we've gotten now a week and a half into the project, they find a reason to not help me. I would love to, but my bike's in the way, I gotta go move my bike, I just can't do it. A couple of weeks ago, Kristen's parents, they live about a mile down the road from us, her parents and her sister. And they said, hey, we really need some help carrying a few things at their house. I looked right at Kristen, this is, we just started painting, I said, I got paint all over my clothes, I don't wanna get my truck dirty. The boys need a bath. I wish I could go do that. She looked at me, she said, if you don't want to do it, just say no, but at least have the courtesy of just saying no to it. But think about how easily we do that in our lives. We give a little excuse. Lord, I would absolutely love to come to the midweek Bible studies we have. Tuesdays are the night that my program comes on at 8 o'clock, and if I get home at 7:45, it doesn't give me enough time to change into my comfy PJs, make my popcorn, get ready for my show. And I can't have that get disrupted. I would love to stay after and hang out after church and talk to people and fellowship, but here in 2 weeks, Lions football starts up at 1 p.m. and I'm not missing kickoff every single time. We don't want to bend anything we have to do. I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not looking out saying, man, you're terrible for not doing any of that. It's so easy. You get home after a long day of work, you already sit down, dinner's ready. Yeah, I have something to go do to help someone at church or do something, but you know what? I'll just stay in tonight. The man wanted to follow Jesus, but not just yet. He knew it was good for him and that he should do it, but he felt there was a good reason why he could not now. If we look at that first scribe and say he was too quick and promising, remember the scribe who said, I'll follow you anywhere you want to go, teacher. This disciple was too slow in performing. And then Jesus responds, just follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Jesus pressed the man to follow him now and clearly stated the principle that family obligations or any other obligations must not be put ahead of following Jesus, and Jesus must come first. Now, I want to be very careful in explaining that. Jesus is not saying, don't take care of your family, don't take care of your parents. This house that we bought, it was in disarray when we bought it. The first day we showed up, there were briar and pricker bushes. I'm not kidding, as tall as the roof. They're about 10 foot tall. It took us 2 full days to go and knock them down with a tractor, 2 mowers. It was a big work. And as we sat there, my brother and I talked, and I've talked to a few other people, it makes me sad to think, where were this woman's kids? Where were her nieces, her nephews, her cousins? And I'm sure you all have heard stories or know that of elderly people who they can't maintain their house anymore and their kids want nothing to do with it. Their kids have absolutely no. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying Jesus says, I don't have to take care of mom and dad when they get old. I don't have to take care. That's not what he's saying. But he's saying we have to put the proper obligations in their proper order. I love my wife more than anything except Jesus Christ. If I don't take care of my relationship and my connection with Jesus Christ, I can't care for her properly. If I don't take care of the man I need to be, the father I need to be, according to Jesus Christ, my kids aren't going to get what they need as well. And he's trying to lay out the obligations in their proper way. I've had the privilege, I coached my oldest son's soccer team and his t-ball team. And I made the mistake, and it was a little bit of being too naive, I guess, my part. Very first day we had the baseball team, t-ball team, I texted and I said, hey, this is with 14 other parents, what night works for practice for everybody? Well, that's a terrible idea, because I now had to try to figure out how to appease 14 sets of parents between their work schedules, their own schedules, whatever they want to do, whatever night. It was a terrible idea. Some parents were like, well, we could probably do 9:30 at night. It's summertime, it's light on a Wednesday. And I was like, well, they're 5-year-olds, so they might want to get to bed at that point. And before we knew it, most every parent came down to, well, what about Sundays? And it was a consensus. No one had anything going on Sundays. Well, I said, well, I'm the coach, and I'm also the pastor at a church, so Sundays don't work for me, so we're not doing Sundays. But it was interesting, because everybody had their obligations, and everyone, whether you admit to it or not, you make a list of the obligations you have in your head, of what I can move around and what I can't move around, right? Little Timmy has a basketball tournament down in Detroit this weekend, and so I have to go to that. Yeah, I miss church, and yeah, I miss a couple of things, but that's all right. I'll hit them next week. Now, I'm not trying to give you the alternative and say, if you're not here every Sunday, don't talk to me, don't look at me. No, that's not what I'm saying. We are not obligated under the penalty of it being a sin if we're not here. But I am saying Scripture is very clear. It says right here, we look at our obligations, and our first obligation is to Christ. But yet it's so easy. Things get in the way. We get busy. I know a couple of years ago, we were sitting there, and I was accosted. This was at a different church in South Carolina. But I was accosted by a group of, there were two elders and one of the deacons at the church that I wouldn't miss. We had church services, well, Sunday school church services, and then we had a big church potluck event. But I wouldn't skip those to go to a golf outing. Two reasons. I suck at golf and I don't like embarrassing myself. Second, I thought it was important to be there. One, because all four of us had signed up to be in charge of things at this church function. But I thought, man, if 4 out of the 50 guys who come to church, the ones that are supposed to be the spiritual leaders, if all of us deem that this golf outing is worth it to miss, what message does that show? Think about your own life. Again, I'm not trying to make you feel bad if you're missing a Sunday. Please don't take it that way. But if you regularly make a pattern of putting other things before church, what does that show your kids, your grandkids, your siblings, those that you're trying to witness to? If the ones you're trying to witness to, unbelievers, and you show them that church isn't a priority in your life, why would they make it one? Why would Jesus become important to them if it's not to you? Jesus was not afraid to discourage potential disciples. Unlike many modern evangelists, he was more interested in quality than quantity. Now, again, I would love to have 1,000 people at every beach service. I'd love to have all of Benzie County, but I know that's not plausible. But one thing I think is important is that we focus on the relationships that those around us have with Jesus Christ. In conclusion, I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. First, do you understand that Jesus is not bound to earthly rules? He's proved it throughout the Gospels time and time again already. We're only to chapter 8. Every miracle he's performed, he does so in an intentional way to make sure that people know he's not bound to earthly matters. Again, I mentioned he goes and touches the man with leprosy. Why? Because he wants to show them, I'm not scared of that. If leprosy has power over Jesus, well, then Jesus isn't very strong, is he? But he's saying, look, I'm not scared of it. It can't do anything to me. As he goes on, he shows, look, I have power over life and death even. Why would I be scared over the things that earthly rules have set up? Second, do you know that faith has always been all that is required? As we look at the centurion, what does Jesus say? He says, look, I marveled at the faith this man had. This Gentile man with no knowledge of the Old Testament scriptures, and yet he believed with faith, and that's why that servant was healed. How are people saved in the New Testament? Faith in Jesus Christ and his finished work. How are people saved in the Old Testament? Faith in Jesus Christ and his finished work. The only difference is we look back to what he's already done on the cross, and they looked forward to what was coming on the cross. But faith is all that's ever been required. There's no amount of works. There's nothing that we can do in order to save ourselves. And last, do you understand the cost of following Christ? But do you also see the necessity? First, do you understand there is a cost of following Christ? Now, I encourage you, if you haven't gotten out of this country and travel, I would highly encourage it. One, it's just good to get out and see things. But as you go to different places and see other believers in Christ other than American believers, you realize there's a lot more going on in the world than just what we see. Here in about 3 weeks, well, about a little over 3 weeks, me and Josh Vanderheid will be going down to Cuba for about a week and a half. And every time I go to Cuba, I'm reminded, and I see, man, my problems are so insignificant. Here's this guy at Lowe's complaining about not being able to get thresholds on a Thursday night. Yet I guarantee he went home to an air-conditioned house, watched his TV show, enjoyed the rest of his night. But there are real struggles going on. Not only that, there are real struggles that everyone goes on, but there are struggles in countries where people identifying with Christ go through where they're even put to death. There are costs to following Christ, but he shows it's a necessity. Why? Because God looks after and takes care of us. Not how we always expect him to, but look at the apostles. They were all brutally killed at the end of their lives, but where are they now? In glory for eternity. Let's pray. God, we thank